blog on their page, so you guys accept people's images there as well.
Yeah. And also, I'm going to be posting a video that I did on containership, sacred container, an invitation to embrace the love, which I did at the Cosmology World Conference a few weeks ago. Once that's up, I'll post it on the blog as well. Yeah, we also post all the videos that we do of the lectures and stuff on the website, so you have access to those. Yeah, there's so many really great things happening with this group, with ways to come together with other student groups and build a community in terms of shared allyship that way, and continuing to have support networks and group work this way, as well as the psychoeducation.
Is the camera ready?
The camera is ready.
Is Hyatt the only one in the picture?
Everybody in that corner is in the picture.
Do you guys want to be in the picture? You don't mind? Okay.
You're still in the picture.
Just to repeat, the videos go on our Facebook page and on our web pages, so just so you know.
Hi, I'm Haya Grossberg, and I'm just going to talk a bit about my own spiritual merging experiences. I think that my most profound and intense phase of spiritual emergence was around the time of ages 19 to 21, and I think that's common for a lot of people. I definitely had a lot of spiritual experiences before that, but at that time, the spiritual qualities that were coming through me were so extreme that they really took over. My life really stopped in a way. I mean, I was really forced to stop the trajectory that I was on and find a whole new way of life. So one thing that I think was characteristic of a lot of my experiences of spirituality and spiritual emergence throughout my life has been illness. And so it's one of the initiations that I think has been a theme for me. And that was definitely the case when I was 19, 20, 21. I was going through a lot of physical illness. And then during my spiritual emergence and physical illness experiences, I ended up getting locked up in the psychiatric system and forced onto psychiatric drugs, and then put onto a whole bunch more. So there was a phase where I was on 7 different psychiatric pharmaceuticals, and I was bedridden from that. And I ended up getting a 3-month fever. So that time, I think, was like really the crux of my spiritual emergence. Those couple of years before that, leading up to that, and after that. And I think that 3-month fever, where I was literally like cocooned away from the world completely, to a large degree, was it was like a cocoon of my spiritual emergence, because I was kind of eating the same food every day and not doing anything besides staying in bed. And I was in a program at that time, so I had some people coming over and helping me and talking to me, but I wasn't really engaging with the outside world in any other ways. So what's interesting is that for me, part of my spiritual emergence has been finding my life purpose, and part of that purpose has actually been activism in the mental health system. So I actually believe that what I went through was in large part to learn what exactly happens in the mental health system when people get hospitalized and forced onto psychiatric drugs, or coerced, or just choose to take them, whatever it is, like to understand what it's like to be on them, and what it's like to come off of them, and what it's like to have your spiritual experiences be pathologized and not understood. So I was really lucky, though, in that after, while I was in the process of withdrawing from those drugs, I encountered a group of other people doing this activist work, which I then got involved in. So I think that a big part of my spiritual emergence was initiating me into understanding my gifts and starting to both appreciate them and find other communities that could also see them and appreciate them. And I ended up becoming a teacher of several different things. I started teaching yoga and meditation and writing, as well as teaching people by public speaking and writing about spirituality. I didn't really call it spiritual emergence, but I think that that's really what I was teaching about when I talked about my experiences in psychiatry and what I was really going through and how psychiatry intercepted that and harmed me. It's kind of a paradox because I feel like psychiatry severely harmed me. I mean, I really was like almost dead when I was on all of those drugs, and I had what I would call a near-death experience, even though I might not have been physically almost dead, but in terms of my soul and my spirit and my capacity for life, I was really almost dead for quite a while. And I didn't feel connected to anything in this world. It really was kind of like being in a retreat, sort of meditative, out-of-body state for several months, or longer actually. So, and then I'd say that after that, I think my life took on a very different quality because it took me several years to, I guess you could say, recover from that experience, or maybe integrate it, both recover my physical body and even recover my sense of self, because during those ages, so I went through that, as I said, around the ages from 19 to 21, but then I was on those drugs going from about 21 to 22, 23, and then after that there was a few years where I think I was a bit insecure, and I did start speaking publicly about my experiences pretty much right away because I had connected with this group and I felt a sense of purpose in that. But still, when I was in mainstream circles, I felt kind of shy, or like I didn't know how to present myself, or like maybe still a bit scared to be found out as like an ex-mental patient or something, even though I didn't believe in it. I think the other really important initiation for me of the spiritual emergence and intersecting with psychiatry experience was to discover that, at least for me, in my reality, there's really no such thing as crazy, and it doesn't matter. Because before that, I had this incredible fear of being crazy, of being intrinsically crazy, and that somehow someone would find out. And of course, in our culture, it's not safe to be considered crazy. So I think I intuitively sensed that, and I think we all do, because our mental health system isn't safe for really anyone. So, I mean, not to say that no one has an experience there that's safe, but anyways, by realizing that by going through the mental health system and seeing it very close up and personal and exactly what it really is, I was able to realize that that fear of being crazy was actually something that had been implanted into me without me knowing by a corporate entity and a corrupt system. So that's been really cool, because ever since that time in my life, I've never really feared being crazy. Even when I have been quote unquote crazy, I haven't really cared because I just know that it doesn't matter. Like, 'cause I guess maybe it's like having a more sort of rock solid, complete and total faith in my life path. So I think that that's really what it is. I've had that since that whole experience. And so I'd say that even though I'm still in a constant spiritual emergence experience, it's more of like a spiritual path experience, because I know that I'm on a certain path. And I think that the challenges that I've faced since then have been integrating all these things into my life, into my work, and creating a life where I can actually share these gifts. Because some of the other gifts that I uncovered besides teaching when I was going through that were intuitive and psychic gifts and healing gifts, really. So a lot of things that can be a bit challenging to carve a space for and a value for in our society. And another element of my spiritual emergence was kind of finding pieces of religion that made sense to me and connecting with religions, but also not feeling that I had to completely subscribe to any particular religion, because that was another part of what caused my crisis, I'd say, was that I was perhaps trying to fit myself into a patriarchal religion that wasn't working for me as a woman, as an artist, as a poet, a writer, a free thinker, somebody who doesn't just want a prescription for how to live, but wants to create that and to find that for myself and with my own mental capacities. So nothing against organized religion entirely, maybe a little bit against it, but also a little bit for it, because there is some real genuine spirituality and tradition that comes along with organized religion, which I was very drawn to, especially during that acute spiritual emergence phase when I was in my early 20s and late teens. So I think that now my daily regular spiritual emergence process has a lot to do with writing and sharing my writing and sharing my voice with the world, and that's been a really big thing, because I think that in a lot of ways I felt very silenced, especially over the years and in relation to childhood trauma. That was another thing, is that I think a big part of why I sought spirituality and religion was in response to a really overwhelming childhood, where my life was just extremely stressful. My family was stressful. I lived in New York City. My high school was stressful. I had like a hour-long commute to school each day, and my parents were divorced, and I went back and forth between their houses. There was some abuse in my family, and it was just a very stressful reality that I grew up in. So I think I had a natural inclination towards seeking peace and like tranquility in response to that. So I started meditating and writing and reading spiritual literature from a very early age, really as a teenager. As an early teen, I was already interested in those pursuits. So that brought me to a certain path where I learned a lot about those traditions and those practices. And I think I've always had certain spiritual practices throughout my life, and they haven't always been exactly the same, but maybe meditation, yoga, daily writing, daily prayer, walking in nature, and then just connecting with other friends who are also on a spiritual path and can see me for who I am and not ever pathologize me or think that my experiences are like too out there or anything. So I guess I just feel really grateful for my spiritual journey, because since I have been on it for such a long time, I've gathered up tons and tons of friends who do get it, who are also having a spiritual path and a spiritual emergence regularly. So I think that that's really one of the most important elements of surviving and thriving as a spiritual person. And I think I should wrap this up, but I just want to say one other thing is that having a career that is really completely intertwined with my spirituality, such that it's not just like a spiritual emergence over here and my life over here, but that my spiritual emergence is about showing me my life path and then being on that path every single day and using it to serve others and to bring out the gifts that, whatever gifts are needing to come through me into the world. So, thank you.
For sharing the very first. Do we questions or just go?
I think what we did last time, which I think worked well, towards hell and
Well, will you then
appreciations
question
of
after?
the end.
Okay. So I
Do you like this
resonate-
recorded?
I do, but I reserve the right to say it can't be public later. I want to see it before it goes on.
Okay. Let me set it up for you. There you go. Alright. All right, you're not on. No, you're good.
I resonate with so much of what many of you said.
You want a warning?
Sure, yes, please.
A minute?
Yes, please. It's hard to know where to start. There's so many entry points to a story, and like you say, careful life. I think part of what I want to do is read a piece that I wrote a couple of years ago. That I originally wrote as a response to a fiction piece, and this was the story that came forth, and it's not at all fiction, but it was the first place that it felt safe to tell the story. A little bit of background to it. Most of this, for me, my intense period was around from ages 25 to 27. Before that, I think it's relevant to go ahead and say that a lot of this, a lot of the particular way that mine unfolded was trauma related as well. As I realized for the first time a year and a half ago, experienced extremely violent and sadistic sexual abuse from the ages of 2 to 12 by my grandfather. And so there was a profound split in my psyche. And I was also very sensitive from a young age and was, trained away from it. And so all of that kind of came out at this point after a period of drug addiction, after becoming a mother at age 22. My psyche was under a lot of stress, and it split wide open, and this happened. And there have been incredible gifts and incredible difficulties with it. But this is what I wrote. And this was about specifically a 3-day period, which was the ecstasy, basically. And during that period, you read poetry about like the smell of the numinous, And during that time, I smelled like that, and it was so incredible. I'm like, oh, that's what they're talking about, and all of these ecstatic experiences, and all of the filters were gone. All of, like you say, your identities, everything was just gone, and I was whole, but I wasn't prepared. It was this spontaneous kundalini experience, and it was like this little teeny wire with this huge amount of power blasting through it, and everything just melted away, and then the crash, and then this is what happened. I titled it Thunderstruck. Thunder struck so hard, it shook the heavy metal doors, slamming them hard against their frame at the end of the hallway, threatening, it seemed, to bring down the very building. The windows rattled too as the wind howled, demanding entrance. Voices carried on the wind from a long ways away, bringing wisps of conversation that sounded familiar, sounded as if it was directed at her, but couldn't quite be made out. Everything felt so strange here, bizarre, surreal, confusing. She had arrived earlier that day, half delirious and strapped to a gurney. It had taken 3 big old boys in blue out on the roadside where they picked her up to wrestle her 121 pounds of muscle and bone onto it. She'd been out for a bike ride and was heading home when she realized her body was being overwhelmed by the energies coursing through it, and she couldn't keep riding. Walking her bike home, she found that impossible too, and stopped to sit down. Getting closer to the earth felt like the safe thing to do, like it would give her what she needed so she could keep going. She had leaned her bike carefully against the guardrail in a very wide part of the bike lane, so she was not obstructing anything, and sat down on the curb to rest. Maybe it had been an unusual spot to sit. In any case, a passerby soon came to ask if she was okay. She could hear them just fine, but really wasn't able to respond through the cloud around her. Cloud wasn't right though, cloud-shaped and shifting, but lacking that nebulous, obscuring quality. It did the opposite, in fact. The air around her was so clear and so brilliant as to almost be cloud-like in its clarity. Somehow she couldn't reach through that blinding light to those she could hear just outside it, dancing like shadows around her. Anyway, pretty soon there were more shadows clustering around the edge of the light, saying things like, "Oh, and she has a kid too," sorrowfully, sensationally, and "Don't worry, there's a big red fire truck coming for you," leering. Soon the shadows parted to let through 3 big dark shapes who came right through the light and grabbed her body, shocking her into focus. They were asking her questions she couldn't understand and seemed dissatisfied with her lack of response, like she owed them something. She wasn't bothering anyone, and if they would just leave her alone, the earth would take care of her and she could walk home. No, they wanted to take her with them, take her away somewhere. They grabbed her, pink pasty faces coming close and big meaty hands grabbing her arms, trying to pull her to her feet. She fought hard, something later about getting one of them, punching one, and when it stopped working to fight, she would go suddenly limp, softening into dead weight, dropping and sliding through their hands like a snake. They moved a lot, the 4 of them, seeming to cover a lot of ground. She would hear, later, that she was chanting in the middle of the road, though that seemed strange since she didn't know any chants, and had been on the side of the road, not the middle. A lot seemed strange. Anyways, she doesn't know how long it went on, the tensing and fighting, struggling with every cell in her body to break free of the many sets of strange hands holding her body, and alternately the softening, so reptilian they could hardly keep a hold of her, not choosing her movements but riding them as they came welling up through her. Eventually it was not enough, and they strapped her down and inserted her into the gaping sterile maw of the ambulance, with its lights and gleaming surfaces. Holding her head down against the hard gurney, pushing her skull down with more strength than she had, and her cervical spine muscles that strained to lift her head, to see the world she was being ripped from, they shoved an oxygen mask over her face and forced her to inhale the cold gas. She never stopped fighting, and they never stopped pushing her down, though for a moment she was able to crane her head up and look out the back window, seeing, as the ambulance turned up the ramp onto the freeway, her friends driving by the ramp going the other way, going to look for her. They slid out of view, of course unable to hear her muffled cries through the steel and glass of the ambulance and the fiber, rubber, cloth of the mask. She stopped fighting then, despairing a little, and the blue uniform took the restraints off her arms. Everything is disjointed, coming in bits and pieces. She remembers the struggle and being abducted, but she doesn't remember the rest of the ride here, but here she is. They are wheeling her out of the ambulance. Fast, rush through the automatic doors, everything rushing by so she can't keep track of it. She ends up in a room with a heavy door. In it there is a small room, a bed partitioned behind glass, and there is a young girl. She doesn't know where this is, where they have taken her, or for what purpose, but that young girl is very ill, very fragile, and still. Her family is sitting with her, and she feels sad seeing her and them. So strange to see them so intimately. Her bed, alone in this large room, is over in the corner opposite the glass room, and there is a cup of ice on the table next to it. She wanders around the room a bit. There is nothing to do, nothing to see except the girl and her family, and she hesitates to look at them. She gets a visitor who tells her to take a piss, which she doesn't understand. "Lose some water weight," she says, making no sense. Eventually she pees in a little cup, which seems to please everyone. Cut to the next scene. She doesn't know how she got there, but we'll find out later. This is probably when they gave her the drugs they will then lie about. Later, they will tell her parents, who will ask because she asked them to, that they gave her no drugs, no meds. Later, they will send her a bill in the mail, demanding she pay money she doesn't have for abducting and harming her. She will go to court, where she will explain to the judge that when they asked her for the 20th time if she took ecstasy, she said yes, thinking that they must mean she stole her state of ecstasy from someone, as if that were possible. The judge will dismiss her case, and she will win a small victory, but not before the beady-eyed girl from the hospital billing department, her legs encased in nylon pantyhose like sausages, shows her the bill. She will explain to her that she's lucky. The hospital is only asking for around $2,000. Showing her the actual bill for around $20,000, showing her the detailed itemization on which she will see Ativan, and another one, an anti-anxiety and an anti-psychotic, a kinder, gentler Halidol. Next scene. She is in a small holding room and they try to feed her. She doesn't want their food. She is left alone in the room and pushes the tray to the edge of the room on the floor, scoots it around the corner, leaves it sitting in the hallway. She gets another visitor. She clings to him, warm and strong and familiar, and asks him to get her off, thinking, maybe, that if she gets off, a term of his that always seems strange to her but now she hopes is a magic phrase like abracadabra, she will get off this ride, this trip that she is on. She doesn't understand it, and she just wants out of these walls. She needs some air and some sky and some earth. More lost time. She is in another place. A locked ward on the top floor with gray speckled linoleum tiles, ugly blue ones interspersed randomly. They give her a room with 2 beds, one of which is occupied by a very quiet woman with long hair, a little older than herself. Her roommate seems like she is on vacation, and she realizes she is bothering her. Still, in the middle of the night, the room is dark and still until the wind comes, threatening, promising to tear down the walls and the doors and set her free. She trembles at the hope of freedom, but shrinks from the violent force. Eventually, the storm passes. At some point, maybe this actually is when they give her the drugs. She is walking around the ward under the harsh fluorescent lights, moving as if underwater or in slow motion. The famous Haldol shuffle, she thinks in a brief burst of clarity, and continues to move strangely around the room, dancing in slow motion, rearranging furniture, spinning backward, her movements not her own but coming through her like she's a slow motion marionette. Torturous movements she cannot control. Then it is the next day, and she's sitting in a vinyl padded chair by the nurse's station, where she is to sit as they're about to take her blood pressure. They're obsessed in this place with numbers they come up with from her body, seeming perplexed and confused if her body gives answers different from the ones they are looking for. Earlier, a nurse weighed her. The scale had a chair like a wheelchair for her to sit on. She sat on it, facing the nurse, and watched the nurse's brow furrow, heard the nurse say, "That can't be right." She turns her head to read what the nurse is reading. The digital monitor behind her that is supposed to measure her. It says 4.6 pounds, and as the nurse reaches past her to reset it and try again, as the nurse leans into her body space but has not yet touched anything, the monitor flies off the frame of the scale and shatters on the floor. The nurse, who has been kind and makes more sense than most of them, jumps and looks scared, then collects herself and says, "I guess we won't be weighing you." So now she's waiting for a different measurement, and the movement comes through her again. She's feeling emotion too, and it is excruciating. Within milliseconds, she is slamming back and forth between every extreme of emotion it is possible to have. Memories and feelings flooding out as her mind shatters and disintegrates. She is in it, feeling it, and it hurts like nothing she has ever felt. Ripping her into shreds, decimating her. At the same time, part of her is removed, out of her body actually, and floating a few feet above her, observing fairly calmly, but thinking, wow, that's ridiculous, that's pretty fucking funny, and generally having a pretty good laugh. What her observer is laughing at is the spectacle her body is making, as she's feeling all this, because she's flopping like a fish there in the vinyl chair. She's thrashing like a cut live wire, with her freshly cut hair sticking up every which way, and her back is arching and she's coming up on her fingers and toes, levitating off the chair just about. Doing her best impression, smirks her observer, of Sigourney Weaver in her red dress on the bed in Ghostbusters. Oh man, that's some funny shit. The staff seems to think it is less funny. She doesn't know how long that goes on. I'm almost done. Though she thinks that was daytime, and by the time a doctor comes to talk to her, it is night again. She is wearing lycra tights and a jog bra that she had ridden in, and the doctor tells her her attire is inappropriate and will write down that she is malodorous, evidently a matter of some surprise after riding strenuously and fighting for her life, and helps her get on one of those confusing 3-sided hospital gowns. "Come on," he says, "let's stir the pot a little more." And that was about 2 days into a 3-day hold, and then I was checked out at AMA by my parents and refused any further psychiatric treatment of any sort. And it took me over a decade to integrate on my own.
Nothing better than the
Wow.
great piece.
Next.
How much warning do you want?
Pardon me?
How much warning do you want?
Do you want a 1-minute warning?
Or 2 minutes or whatever you want?
That's fine. I don't even know if I'll be able to talk for the full 10 minutes because I've never spoken in a group before, and I'm feeling a little nervous, and this piece brought up a lot of memories for me. I can relate. I've been hospitalized maybe 7 or 8 times in my life, and you know, there's the trauma that brings you there, and then there's the trauma that happens while you're there. So it's trauma on trauma. I got to the point where see myself as a healer in those situations, and what can I give other people here, and that was a really good way to survive in those periods where I was hospitalized anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. And my first spiritual emergence happened when I was 23, after my twin daughters were born, and I know how I ended up there. I was living a lie for about 2 years, and it destroyed me, and my heart shut down because my consciousness and my heart were not connected. And that's when I learned that our wisdom comes from here, not from here. This doesn't work without this. And that was an amazing lesson, because I've been committed to honesty my whole life, and wanting that lightness in my consciousness has made things so much easier, and it's been a big part of my mental health. My most recent episode happened, I went on a 5-day silent retreat, meditation retreat with Adi Ashanti, and it was called Resurrecting Jesus. And he's like a non-dualism teacher, so the fact that he taught this retreat on Jesus was interesting, but I love that teacher, and we were going to go together, and he got sick, so I went by myself. And I came out of that. During the retreat, we did a chant every day. It was silent, other than the chant was Cor Meum Tibio Ferro Domine, which is, my heart I offer to you, dear Lord. So basically, offering up yourself to God for service. And the following week, I had holotropic breath work here as part of the Sound, Voice, and Music Healing program. And you signed a release form, and I didn't think they were going to let me do it because I have the bipolar diagnosis. And but I felt very strong, because I've been meditating for 8 years. I'm stable and fine, and I felt I was. But during the breath work, I felt this energy in my hands, both of my hands, and it came very gently, but it got so intense that I felt like my hands were being held by somebody. And I felt like my left hand was Jesus and my right hand was John Coltrane, because John Coltrane had been a big part of my life during that period. And he's a saxophone player, and it was John Coltrane. And the person who was my sitter, who sits with you through the experience, she's the daughter of the founders of the St. John Coltrane African Orthodox Church. So anyway, I came out of that feeling like, okay, I don't know where I'm going on this journey, but I know I'm being held. I feel like I'm being told you're not alone. And a few days after that, I was cleaning. I'm a personal assistant. Part of my job is to clean, so I'm cleaning a mantle at my work. And a picture of a woman who's deceased tells me to light candles for the 132 children that got killed in Pakistan that day. And so I went and asked my client's husband if that was okay, because she wasn't there, and he said, okay, yeah, that's fine. So I lit candles that were just below. I lit like 5 candles, and then I was told later to light 3 more, so there were 8, and 8's infinity and all that, so it was all making sense. And then I got, go to Whole Foods and buy as many candles as you can and make this altar at your home. And so I did that as well, and this altar kept building and building and building, and before long I had altars all over my home. And this is what happens every time I have this spiritual emergence. I start making altars, and I'm trying to do this healing work, and there's all this ritual involved, and repetitive things. Like, I don't do ritual in my daily life, but when I'm in this, I feel like I'm this vehicle for ritual, and I'm like a spiritual warrior. There's things that need healing, and there's darkness that is coming into play. I've had so many dark episodes, but this one, because he was with me, but this Bill was with me every day for 2 weeks. That's the only way I avoided the hospital, because he was helping me, and I become compliant with taking medication, antipsychotic drugs during this, because it actually allows me to not get too spun out. I can function better with some sense of management through that. And so I'm probably one of the only manic people that agrees to take drugs, because you do feel all that elation and that you're so connected, and you know, it's like God is just coursing through your whole body, and there's all this energy and everything that has to do with love and connectedness and beauty, and you know, why would you want to shut that down? But I don't want to end up in the hospital, so I'm like, okay, I kind of play the game, and I've learned how to navigate with people who are open-minded enough to, okay, she's eating mud now, okay, you know, I get told to do all these really strange things, which they make a lot of sense at the time. I'm told to eat compost. Okay, well that's about, you know, integrating with everything on the planet, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, the garbage, that, you know, it's all part of us. And the more we embrace, you know, everything that is, you know, the things that we reject are the things that, you know, we're going to create problems for ourselves, and we allow and accept. And so this is one of the lessons that comes through every single time. And so eating compost is a metaphor for that. And I was even told to like drink some of my own urine, which sounds completely bizarre, I know, but that was a self-love thing. And I listen, and I don't. The more I listen and align with these energies that they're telling me to do things, the more things unfold, and there's this like co-creativity going on, and things just work better. The darkness doesn't come in. It didn't come in at all this time. That was the first episode ever where I wasn't terrified out of my mind about things I couldn't see that were coming after me and wanting to kill me. That's what some of my experiences have been. And that was the difference, was the really trusting and allowing, and the non-judgment on my part as well as on people around me. They've been my family, but especially my partner here, was just, you know, really going with the flow. And okay, as long as she's being safe, let her eat mud and compost. And I made this big pot of, I cook things. It's like this time it was a crock pot, but it's like this cauldron that everything that needs healing goes into this pot, and it cooks for days. And you know, plastic was going in there, batteries, you know, things that are in the ocean that don't belong in the ocean. There was like an alchemical magic thing that I believed was healing the oceans. With my whole heart, I believe this. And you know, who's to say that there's not some energetic thing happening in the ocean now that it's, you know, who knows? I don't know, but it feels like I can't not do these things. So, you know, I don't go to work, I don't do anything. My whole life becomes a 24/7 ritual, except for when I'm sleeping, which is usually drug-induced. What else? I mean, I was like bowing down 108 times in the backyard regularly, and you know, after the 108th bow in my front yard, I scream all at the top of my lungs 3 times, and I didn't know that was coming, but that's what came through me, just like, ah, my whole neighborhood heard it.
I had to take her out of the front yard, and she had mud. She was eating mud while she was doing it, and she said, okay, all right, I'm coming.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, it's like I learned that
Easy.
making sure other people aren't freaked out too is a big part of that. It's not all about me, it's about, are you okay too? And he wasn't okay with some of the things I did, so I'm like, okay, tone it down. And
Go with the wind, you know.
so yeah, I was instructed to like get my didgeridoo and clear my entire home, just clearing energy. And I just, you know, I try to make sense of these things afterwards. And I know that it's connecting with the ancestors is huge. Like Day of the Dead isn't once a year, it's every day. The ancestors are here, they want our attention, they want us to use them in their lives, in our lives. You know, they're part of it all. And so I need to open to that, I know, and hopefully, you know, more of us will start doing that. Well, there's so many lessons, they're still unfolding, but the depression comes in after all this, and that's just like a nightmare. I'm still trying to come through that. My brain doesn't work right, I can't think clearly, I want to hibernate and not be around people, and that's not fun. That's this part I would rather not have, but you know, I have to embrace that too, and hopefully, I don't know, hopefully whatever I've shared here today resonates with some of you, and we're not alone, these things happen, and I guess I'm a volunteer for the universe to bring energy through that does something, there's some healing. Oh, one last thing, these purple flowers that I bought, when I bought the candles, status, they blossomed all these little white buds all over them after they'd been cut, and then they gradually just like disappeared, and to me that was a metaphor or symbolic of these 132 children going to the light, and so I was just like, ecstatic over feeling like this ritual was actually possibly doing something in the spirit world to help heal and free all those souls that may have been stuck, or people weren't letting go of them because of all the trauma. So that's my story.
Thanks a lot.
This is putting me in a whole other state of mind. I have something that actually I didn't bring with me, but was on her computer. And, but I don't feel like I can read it. It's just a one page. Would anybody else? Yeah, oh, I would love that. I'd have to get too linear to read it, but let me give just a context. It's a piece that I sent, and I gave it to a lot of folks. I put it in my dissertation when I finished. It was really toward the end of my dissertation, because it had, it was by a guy named Prechtel. You've heard of him? And it really described what happens to someone when they're called in the spiritual emergency work. And it seemed to fit my experience as a kid, and from that time on, like so well, and it seemed so unavailable, until I dug it up in a book on shamanism in my graduate work. I mean, it was like another world, this South American shamanism thing, and the shamanism has opened up that kind of stuff. So this little piece that I would love if you could read it, and then I just want, maybe I'll say something about it, but I want to share it with all of you, because it really helped me see what the challenges that when you're open. Oh, what I'll share one quick thing here just before I think it'll help. There was something, and I was been talking about this, so excuse me if I told a few of you about it, but when you're touched on the lip in the Zohar, they talk about being touched on the lip by a spirit, angel, before you're born. Okay, and it's kind of a weird thing, and the reason that you get touched on the lip is so that when you come into the world of duality from the world of unity, you forget where you came from. It's a gift from the angel. Now think about that for a second. You're supposed to forget, and the reason that you're supposed to forget is because if you remember where you came from too much, it's a vague memory only left after you're touched. Some people are touched hard and they have a big cleft there. Some people aren't touched so hard, so that's a little fun thing to look at, folks. But so you're touched, so you forget where you came from. So while you're in this world of duality, it's not so painful for you to deal with the conundrums and the tearing and the duality, because if you compared it all the time to the unity realm, it would be excruciating. Okay, so this is in the Zohar, in the esoteric part of the Jewish Kabbalah, and that got pretty much separated from any training anybody got, because I went through that whole tradition, wrote, just memorization. I didn't even know what I was reading, when I was standing up there reading the thing, they didn't care, they just wanted you to read it, for the grandparents, right? But the thing is, so it's not available, this info. So when I found this little piece from Prechtel, it was the same story, but from South American shamanism, that I found in the Kabbalistic tradition from the Zohar about being touched on the lip. And you'll see it's a little bit different, delivery, but it's the same conundrum. And that'd be, I really appreciate
So this is from Secrets of the Talking Jaguar, 1998. Shamans were usually born frightened and frail and timid compared to the more confident children. What scared them so early on was the fact that since they were more allied with nature, they were not blessed 100% with the normal human spiritual amnesia at birth. Therefore, they could still see and remember the other worlds where they had come from. But it wasn't the other worlds that terrified them. They were made afraid by this world, the one they were born into. They just couldn't understand the inability of other people to see the big picture of all the layers. This world seemed harsh. People seemed self-centered. The people thought children like this were dazed and distant. Eventually, this world's severity bit the heart of the young shaman, and he or she would fall powerfully sick, unable or unwilling to live in the usual way. Sometimes they did die. This world was too sharp for their tender soul. The shamanic nature power, the spirit who had called for the child's birth, would come in the delirium of the illness or in a powerful dream to bring the child back to life. But then the little shamanic candidate was sometimes almost melted away and killed by the curing power itself, as it can be so strong. So, another initiated adult shaman would be summoned, and that person would, recognizing the plight of the prospective novice, cure him by ritually containing the child's oversized power. Recruited thus by the spirits, the little shaman was directed to a teacher, or sometimes the attending shaman might take him under his own wing. An apprenticeship was designed to cook you like a pottery jar, so that at initiation, the jar of your body and soul could carry the power without getting killed by its strength.
And that's the tikkun too, the same. I was just thinking about when you repair the vessel, it gets cracked just by being born, and that's the overpowering, creating a vessel that can hold it. You know, and so this was real interesting to me to see the story told again in this way, and it really had a lot of meaning for me because it seems it's easy to diagnose stuff. It's so easy. I mean psychotherapy is our new shamanism. That's in a way, but it's taken a while, like 100 years, for it to reincorporate some of the spiritual parts to it. It's like we're starting off the psychedelic research center here. It's the same thing. They're starting the psychedelic research center by taking blood samples to get levels of whatever they're looking for in the blood. They have to start with the science first, and I think psychology had to start with the science first to prove itself to itself and to everybody else. And so slowly, we regather the indigenous wisdom. My indigenous wisdom is back in Hungary somewhere. I don't know, it's lost. So it makes sense that I remember the shamanism here just to remind me that there is something like that. So if we're walking on their land, maybe I'll find out about my own shamanism now. Return to that, and look at the pieces that I left behind, the stories that were in my tradition and all our traditions. We all have an indigenous, background to reconnect with, and I think that way, we can acknowledge the Native American people here, our own tradition, and we connect with the mystery that then you're ready to hold the mystery, when you have the pieces there. I think so. Thank you, really read that beautifully. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good message.
Thanks, it was synchronistic that she had that there because I didn't know I was going to talk. I just kind of was like, yeah, I'm going to tell stories. I thought it was going to be more informal, but it was great that you had to. Thank you for saying that. That was perfect.
Spiritual homesickness.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this building holds us kind of people. That's what I found here for 25 years, that we come here to remember and to support each other. It's really, Aurobindo and Chowdhury and Alan Watts and, all these people that, saw a need to connect with the East. They weren't articulating indigenous shamanism because when they started the school here, they were just getting a behold on what was going on down in Mexico with the Native American, people, and I mean, the Mexican American with Maria Sabina, and they were just finding all these other traditions, so it wasn't just the East, but it was the South that was coming in here. So this is a place that's really trying to bring it cross-culturally back together. It's a big job, because we're so differentiated, I think, it's so specialized and individualistic and materialistic. So one last thing I think I want to just share it, and just for you to reflect on it, and anytime you want to give me some feedback on it, because I see, a lot of people are talking about set and setting, and there's a sacred set and setting that we all know, that we've all entered into and embraced, and then there's a profane set and setting that we go back to afterwards, and if it's different than the sacred one, you got a new problem to deal with, and we got to help each other with that, because we're living between two worlds now. We're living with the experiential knowledge of the sacred set and setting. We've entered into that. Some of us have died in there over and over again and been reborn, and then we come back to the profane, and so when you were talking about integrating your work into the spiritual, it's absolutely perfect, because that's the only way I think we can do it now. We're living in between there. This is the work that we're doing. It's remembering that we're building like a third body almost between that sacred and profane. So it's really it's a big job to build a third body in a culture that likes to stay up doing something. You know what I mean? It's like you're always going to that with the synthesis point when people just like to Democrat, Republican. I think it never ends. And last thing I'll share. Do I have a minute left?
1 minute.
1 minute? Okay, Rajneesh. I went to see Rajneesh because I thought, I read one thing that he said the mind as a mechanism, the mental body, you gotta realize, is madness. Just the whole fucking mind is madness. He says, so if you can recognize the mind itself works in polarities. One day you're a theist, the next day you're an atheist, one day you're in love, you're not, okay. If you could see the mind as a mechanism of madness, and how do you transcend that tension of that madness of the mind, the function, the very function of the mental body, the mind, choiceless awareness of the whole mechanism. It's kind of an awareness point. Again, it's a third body. It's a perspective, on looking down upon, or looking from a distance, not being totally, absorbed in that polarity, back and forth, trying to pick the right side. You know what I mean? If the choiceless awareness of the whole mechanism is madness. That's, he said, the only way to transcend the tension in the mental body. And I found that to be so helpful when I was bouncing around, trying to, and then, it's kind of like a physics of mental health, you have that awareness. So that's what people are building, third body awareness and we can all tap into that together. That's a collective space. I think that we can all tune into together.
Like a collective psychosynthesis.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that's esoteric.
Rather than a third, esoteric, rather than a third thing, it's just a melding of the two.
Yeah, it's a synthesis. It's an emergent quality. There was a guy that I really liked. This guy said it's a higher order simplicity. You think our body is a higher order simplicity, although a system's functioning at the same time, and we come out with a coherent, voice. But it's kind of amazing. So it's a higher order simplicity. It's not just complexity, infinity. So that's.
Who said that?
This guy Skolimowski, he was the first Polish eco-psychologist in Poland. He came here and taught here. Henryk Skolimowski, he's got The Theater of the Mind and Eco-Philosophy, 2 little books he wrote. And he's talked about complexity consciousness gives rise at a certain point to higher order simplicity consciousness. And I thought, that's beautiful. You don't hear too many people talk about higher order simplicity. It has to be like complex, all the time, and it does feel, it gets boring to be complex all the time. Is you start bouncing around again.
first question. I think,
Oh,
Wait, are you?
One
I
more.
think Jay's
Oh, there's
still-
one more,
do
sorry.
you still want
Yes,
to
sir.
share?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry.
Is there time? It's already 9.
Yeah, there's time.
Okay.
Question is, Jay, do you want to, if you sit across there, I could film you, or I don't have to film if you don't want?
Yeah, I prefer not to.
All right.
There we go.
Signing off.
Thanks.